New Year's Eve had always made me reflective. Not the loud kind of reflective, the kind that comes when you're folding laundry alone, the TV playing something festive in the background, and you realize another year has passed without you ever asking yourself what you actually wanted. That night, I was at home by 6:30 p.m. No makeup, no plans, no countdown outfit. Just me, a quiet apartment, and the assumption that if anything came up, I'd be the one expected to handle it. My phone buzzed while I was putting dishes away. I didn't rush to check it. That should have been my first clue. When I finally picked it up, my mother's name filled the screen. "You're keeping the kids tonight. We have plans." No question mark. No warning. No explanation. Just a decision, made without me. I stared at the message longer than I should have. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I did. Completely. Instantly. With the kind of familiarity that only comes from repetition. This wasn't a request. It was a role reminder. I typed, deleted, retyped, then erased everything again. My thumbs hovered over the screen, waiting for permission I knew I didn't need, but had been trained to seek anyway. I looked around my apartment. The small New Year's decorations I'd half-heartedly put up. The unopened bottle of sparkling water I'd bought earlier, telling myself I'd at least mark the moment. I hadn't planned on going out, but I hadn't planned on being drafted either. 5 minutes passed. Then another message appeared. "They'll be there by 8. We won't be late." I laughed softly. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd how easily my time had been claimed. No one asked if I was free. No one wondered if I had plans. No one considered that not having plans didn't mean being available. I sat down at the kitchen table and felt something unfamiliar rise in my chest. Not anger. Recognition. This wasn't about babysitting. It never had been. It was about who got to live and who got assigned. My sister had always been the one with plans. Parties. Dinners. A life that continued uninterrupted because someone else, usually me, absorbed the responsibilities she left behind. And my mother. She called it family helping family. I called it default. I looked at the clock. 7:02 p.m. I imagined the kids arriving, jackets half-zipped, energy buzzing, already wound up from the idea of staying up late. I imagined the chaos, the cleanup, the exhaustion that would follow. And I imagined midnight arriving quietly while everyone else celebrated somewhere else. Something inside me shifted. I typed back. "I can't tonight." The response came immediately. "What do you mean you can't? It's New Year's." Exactly. I set my phone down without replying. For the first time in years, I didn't rush to explain myself. I stood up, walked to the window, and watched fireworks begin to pop faintly in the distance. Too early, too eager, like people rushing toward a new year without resolving the old one. At 7:40 p.m., my mother called. I let it ring. At 7:48, my sister texted. "Are you serious right now?" I didn't answer. At 7:59, there was a knock on my door. I didn't move. My heart was beating hard, but my hands were steady. From inside my apartment, I heard voices in the hallway, confusion, irritation, disbelief. I stayed where I was. Because for the first time, I wasn't choosing silence. I was choosing myself. And I had no idea yet what that choice was about to cost, or give back. Saying no shouldn't have felt radical. But it did. As soon as I locked the door and leaned my forehead against it, memories started lining up. Quiet, obedient, familiar. Moments I'd never questioned because they'd been wrapped in words like family and responsibility. I'd been the backup plan for as long as I could remember. When my sister went back to work after her first child, I was the one who adjusted my hours. When she needed a night out, I was the one who didn't mind. When plans fell through, I was the solution offered before the problem was fully explained. It was never framed as a burden. It was framed as trust. You're so good with them. They adore you. You don't have much going on anyway. That last one had always stung, even when I pretended it didn't. I thought back to the first time it happened, years ago, when I just moved into my own place. I'd been excited, nervous, proud. My mother showed up with the kids one afternoon and asked if I could just watch them for an hour. They picked them up the next morning. I didn't complain. I told myself it was temporary. It never was. Over time, the requests stopped sounding like requests. They became assumptions, then instructions. My calendar filled with other people's needs. Holidays were the worst. Thanksgiving. You don't travel anyway. Christmas shopping. Can you take them for a bit? New Year's Eve. You'll be home. It was said like a fact. I'd absorbed it without protest because pushing back felt selfish. Like I was violating some unspoken agreement that being reliable meant being available, always. That night, sitting on my couch while fireworks cracked outside, I realized how much of my life had been shaped by avoiding disappointment that wasn't mine to carry. My phone buzzed again. A voicemail this time. My mother's voice was tight, controlled. "You're really putting us in a difficult position," she said. "We already told them you'd be fine with it." I replayed that sentence. We already told them. They hadn't even waited for my answer. That wasn't miscommunication. That was entitlement. I didn't call back. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up my work schedule for the next week. Meetings, deadlines, commitments I'd made and honored without anyone noticing. I wasn't free. I was invisible. At 8:30 p.m., my sister texted again. "Mom's crying. The kids are upset. This isn't fair." Fair. I almost laughed. Fair had never been part of the equation when it came to me. I typed slowly. I wasn't asked. 3 dots appeared. "You know how things work," she replied. Yes, I did. That was the problem. I muted the conversation. Outside, fireworks grew louder. Neighbors cheered. Music pulsed faintly through the walls. The world was counting down, celebrating possibility. Inside my apartment, I sat with the weight of a realization I'd avoided for years. If I didn't draw a line now, I never would. This wasn't about one night. It was about a role I'd been playing without ever auditioning for. Around 9:15 p.m., there was another knock on my door. Louder this time. Followed by my sister's voice, sharp, impatient. "Open up." I stayed seated. I wasn't afraid. I was done explaining. Eventually, the hallway went quiet again. I checked the time. 9:27. They'd had enough time to make other plans. They just hadn't wanted to. The truth settled in gently, like it had been waiting for me to notice. They didn't rely on me because I was the only option. They relied on me because I was the easiest one to say yes. And tonight, for the first time, I hadn't. The guilt I expected never arrived. Instead, there was a strange sense of calm, unfamiliar, but steady. I poured myself a glass of sparkling water, lifted it toward the window where fireworks lit the sky, and whispered a quiet promise to myself. This year would be different. Not louder. Not dramatic. Just honest. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It came in waves. The first wave was confusion. Messages asking if I was okay, if something had happened, if I'd misunderstood. The second wave was irritation. By morning, it had sharpened into accusation. I woke up to 7 missed calls. 5 from my mother. 2 from my sister. I didn't panic. That alone told me how much had changed. I made coffee, sat at the table, and let the phone keep buzzing while I watched the city wake up. Confetti still clung to the sidewalks from the night before, damp and flattened, like a celebration already forgotten. When I finally checked my messages, the tone had shifted. We had to cancel everything. Do you know how embarrassing that was? You can't just decide not to show up. I read them without responding. At 10:12 a.m., my mother sent a longer message. She wrote about how exhausted she was, how hard it had been lately, how much she'd counted on me, how disappointed she felt. Not once did she ask why I'd said no. She assumed the reason didn't matter. I called her back. She answered on the first ring. "Are you feeling better now?" she asked immediately, like I'd been sick. "I was never unwell," I replied. She sighed. "Then what was that last night?" "It was me saying no," I said calmly. "You don't do that," she snapped, then caught herself. "I mean, you never have." "I know," I replied. "That's not how families work," she said. "We help each other." "I help," I said. "I just don't disappear anymore." She was quiet for a moment. "You hurt your sister," she said finally. I thought of all the times I'd swallowed my own hurt to keep things smooth. "I didn't cause this," I replied. "I stopped preventing it." She hung up on me. By noon, the story had made its way through the family network. An aunt texted to ask if I was overwhelmed. A cousin suggested I needed a break. Someone else implied I was being dramatic. Everyone had an opinion. No one asked for mine. I spent the afternoon cleaning my apartment, not frantically, but methodically. I threw out things I didn't need anymore. Old notes, old reminders, old habits. Around 3, my sister showed up again. This time, I opened the door. She stood there with her arms crossed, eyes sharp. "You really messed things up," she said. "I didn't," I replied. "I just didn't fix them." She scoffed. "You always do this, act like you're above it." "I'm not above it," I said. "I'm exhausted by it." She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "You don't have kids," she said. "You don't understand how hard it is." I nodded. "You're right. I don't." "Then you should have helped." "I have," I said. "For years." "That was different." "It wasn't," I replied. "I just didn't say no." She shook her head. Mom's barely holding it together. "I'm sorry," I said. "But I'm not the solution anymore." Her voice rose. "So what, now you're punishing us?" "No," I said quietly. "I'm choosing myself." That seemed to unsettle her more than anger would have. She left without another word. The rest of the day passed in uneasy quiet. That evening, my phone buzzed with a notification. Not a message. A post. My sister had shared a photo from years ago, me holding her kids, smiling. The caption read, "Family shows up. No matter what." I felt my stomach tighten. It wasn't a direct attack. It was worse. It rewrote history. I didn't comment. I didn't explain. I took a screenshot. Not for revenge. For truth. Later that night, as I prepared for bed, I realized something else had shifted. They weren't upset because they'd lost help for one night. They were upset because I'd interrupted a system that depended on my silence. And systems don't collapse quietly. They push back. Hard. By the third day, the narrative had settled. Not the truth, the version that traveled faster. I started hearing it in fragments, filtered through concern and judgment dressed up as care. "She's overwhelmed." She snapped. "She's going through something." No one said I'd been taken for granted. No one said I'd been assumed into silence. They framed my boundary as instability. That was easier. On Thursday evening, My aunt called and asked if we could meet for coffee. Her voice was gentle, cautious, like she was approaching something fragile. We sat by the window of a quiet cafe, steam rising from our cups. "I'm worried about you," she said. "I know," I replied. "Your mom thinks you're holding on to resentment," she continued. "That you're letting it cloud your judgment." I looked at her calmly. "I'm holding on to clarity." She frowned slightly. "You know your sister didn't mean to put you in that position." "She didn't have to mean it," I said. "She relied on it." My aunt stirred her coffee. "Family makes mistakes." "Yes," I replied. "Patterns aren't mistakes." She didn't argue. That night, my mother called again, this time calmer, almost rehearsed. "We need to talk," she said. "All of us." "I'm listening," I replied. "Come by tomorrow," she said. "We'll clear the air." I knew what that meant. A room. A united front. A conclusion already decided. I went anyway. Their house looked the same as always. Warm lights, familiar furniture, the illusion of comfort intact. My sister sat on the couch. My mother stood near the kitchen. My father leaned against the counter, arms folded. I stayed near the door. "This isn't about babysitting," my mother began. "This is about respect." I nodded. "I agree." "You embarrassed us," my father said. "You made us look unreliable." I met his gaze. "You made plans without me." My sister scoffed. "You could have just said something earlier." "I did," I replied. "For years." Quietly. She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. My mother stepped forward. "We never meant to hurt you." "I know," I said. "But intention doesn't erase impact." My father exhaled sharply. "So what do you want?" The question hung in the air. "I want choice," I said. "I want to be asked. I want the option to say no without consequences." My sister laughed. "That's not realistic." "It is for everyone else," I replied. Silence followed. My mother's voice softened. "If you just help a little." "No," I said gently. The word felt solid. Final. My father's jaw tightened. "If you keep pushing like this, you're going to isolate yourself." I nodded. "Then it'll be by choice." They didn't expect that answer. The meeting ended without resolution. No apology. No agreement. Just the quiet understanding that something fundamental had changed. As I left, my mother called after me. "You're making a mistake," she said. I turned back once. "I made one for years." "This isn't it." Outside, the air felt lighter. That night, messages flooded in, relatives repeating the family-approved version of events. Some offered advice. Others warned me not to be stubborn. I didn't respond. Instead, I wrote everything down. Dates, words, moments. Not to defend myself, to remember who I was becoming. Because for the first time, I wasn't managing perceptions. I was honoring myself. And that, I knew, would cost me comfort, but give me peace. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. But it was honest. For the first time in years, my phone wasn't buzzing with expectations disguised as favors. No last-minute plans. No, "can you just," messages. No assumptions that my time belonged to someone else. It felt unfamiliar, almost empty. And then, slowly, it felt like space. The family adjusted, whether they wanted to or not. I heard about it secondhand. My sister had to cancel a brunch because she couldn't find a sitter. My parents stayed in one night longer than they'd planned. Complaints floated through the family group chat about how hard things were now. No one connected the dots out loud. But I did. I wasn't punishing them. They were experiencing the weight I'd been carrying quietly for years. One afternoon, a cousin stopped by unexpectedly. She stood in my doorway, hesitant. "I didn't realize how much you did," she admitted. I nodded. Most people didn't. She lingered for a moment, then added, "They're struggling." "I know," I said gently. "So am I. Just differently." After she left, I sat with that truth. Struggle doesn't disappear when you set boundaries. It changes shape. Some days were harder than I expected. I questioned myself late at night, replaying conversations, wondering if I could have handled things better. If I'd been too firm, too cold, too sudden. But then I remembered how many times I'd been flexible. How many times I'd said yes while swallowing resentment. How many celebrations I'd watched from the sidelines while holding someone else's responsibility. I started rebuilding my life in small, quiet ways. I enrolled in a weekend class I'd been postponing. I reconnected with a friend I'd lost touch with because I was always busy. I planned my evenings without leaving them open, just in case someone needed me. I learned to rest without guilt. That was the hardest part. One evening, my mother called. Her voice was tired, not angry, not sharp, just worn down. "I didn't realize how much we depended on you," she said. I stayed silent, letting the words exist on their own. "We're trying to figure things out," she continued. "It's difficult." "I know," I replied. There was a pause. "You could still help sometimes." I took a breath. "If I choose to. And if I'm asked." She didn't argue. That felt like progress. Not reconciliation. Recognition. The next time I saw my sister, weeks later, she looked different. Less hurried. Less entitled. More aware. She didn't apologize. But she didn't assume either. That mattered. As winter faded and routines shifted, I noticed something else. I was lighter. Not because everything was fixed, but because I wasn't pretending anymore. I wasn't the reliable one. I was just myself. And for the first time, that was enough. Spring arrived without asking permission. The days grew longer. The air softened. Life kept moving, steady, indifferent to family tension, reminding me that the world didn't pause when I chose myself. And neither did I. I didn't disappear from my family's life. I just stopped being the glue that held everything together at my own expense. The difference mattered. When I showed up now, it was intentional. When I declined, it was honest. No explanations layered with guilt. No apologies for having a life that belonged to me. They noticed. At first, it made them uncomfortable. Then, slowly, it made them adapt. My sister started planning ahead. Actual planning. Sitters booked. Schedules discussed. Sometimes she asked if I was available. Sometimes I wasn't. And the world didn't end. My parents learned to sit with their own inconvenience, to adjust expectations instead of outsourcing them to me. There were still moments of tension. Old habits don't vanish overnight. But something fundamental had shifted. They saw me, not as a resource, not as a fallback, not as the responsible one, as a person. One evening, months later, we sat around the same table where so many assumptions had once been made. The kids laughed in the background. The conversation flowed without pressure. My mother looked at me and said quietly, "We should have asked more." It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement. I nodded. I should have said no sooner. We both owned our part. That felt like balance. Later that night, walking home alone, I thought about that New Year's Eve, the moment everything changed. How a simple sentence had revealed a truth I'd been avoiding. Not because I was weak, but because I was conditioned to be agreeable. That version of me wasn't wrong. She was surviving, but she wasn't living. I don't regret the years I gave. I regret the years I believed my worth depended on how useful I was. Now, when the year turns, I make my own plans. Sometimes they include family. Sometimes they don't. And both are okay. Because belonging isn't proven through sacrifice. It's proven through respect. And if that respect has to begin with me, then so be it. That new year didn't start with fireworks or celebration. It started with a boundary. And it gave me something far more lasting than applause. It gave me myself.